I still remember the way my boss looked at me that afternoon, leaning back like he owned the world while telling me the VP role I'd been promised for years was postponed indefinitely. He thought I'd swallow the humiliation. He thought I'd stay quiet. What he didn't know was that the system he depended on, the people he relied on, and the stability he bragged about were never his to control. They were mine until the moment I walked away. If you've ever been underestimated, stay with me. And if this story hits something in you, I'd love for you to subscribe and share your own experience in the comments. I spent 14 years at HarborSpan Freight Solutions, building a reputation I thought would protect me. Thought would mean something when the time came to step into the role I had quietly carried for years. I didn't start with authority or status. I started as the person who volunteered for every crisis shift, who solved routing failures at 2 in the morning, who memorized client preferences so precisely that entire manufacturing lines ran smoother because I was the one coordinating them. Over time, the Southwest region became my creation. I designed the cross-carrier protocols, rebuilt our client recovery system, and lifted our on-time delivery rates to levels our competitors couldn't touch. People like to call me dependable, but dependable was just another word for the person leadership expected to keep everything running while they collected the praise. Still, I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I made myself essential enough, the recognition would come the way it does in those tidy corporate success stories people like to repeat. For years, Brent, my regional VP, told me I was next in line. He said I had the operational mind the company needed. He said the board admired my results. He said the VP seat was just waiting for timing to align, and I believed him, not because I was naive, but because 14 years of sacrifice deserve more than empty promises. My team believed it too. Maya once joked that HarborSpan's real stability was measured by my pulse. Riley told new hires that if they ever got lost in our systems, they should just ask what Sela would do. Cass built half her career around the workflows we created together. So when Brent scheduled a meeting 3 months in advance to finalize your VP transition, I thought the long wait was finally ending. I walked into headquarters feeling the kind of cautious excitement you only allow yourself after being burned before, but refusing to give up entirely. People in the office smiled at me that day, and for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a future where my effort and my title finally matched. I wasn't chasing prestige, I was chasing fairness, the simple dignity of being recognized for the work I had poured my life into. I had no reason to expect the ground beneath me was already shifting. No hint that the credit for my accomplishments had been quietly redirected upward. No sign that the loyalty I held like a promise would be the very thing used against me. I walked into that building believing the story I had been told for 14 years. I had no idea that by the end of that week, everything I built would become the very leverage I used to walk away. When Brent called me into his office that Thursday at 4:15 p.m., I walked in expecting final details, contract language, and the official announcement I had waited more than a decade to hear. His assistant even gave me a congratulatory smile as I passed her desk, the kind that made my stomach flutter with cautious hope. But the moment I stepped into his office, something felt off. Brent was too relaxed, leaning back in his chair with his hands folded behind his head, the posture of a man who believed he had already won something. He didn't offer me a seat the way he normally did for formal discussions. He didn't reference the VP transition packet we'd supposedly review. He just said, "Selah, we need to talk about the VP situation." Like the word promotion had never once crossed his lips in the past 18 months. "Situation?" I asked, because the shift in tone was impossible to ignore. He nodded slowly, almost sympathetically, as if rehearsing the expression of someone forced to deliver disappointing news. The board decided to postpone the role indefinitely. Budget timing just isn't right. For a second, I thought he was joking, the kind of cruel, awkward preamble someone uses before a surprise reveal, but there was no reveal. No warm grin, no paperwork, just him staring at me like the matter was closed before it even opened. "Brent, you told me the role was approved," I said carefully, controlling the tremor in my voice. "You scheduled this meeting to finalize my transition." He shrugged, the careless kind that says, "What do you want me to do?" The landscape shifted. We have to be smart about costs. And honestly, Selah, I need you focused on operations, not executive politics. You're already doing great work where you are. There it was, the humiliation buried inside a compliment. My work was valuable enough to rely on, but not valuable enough to pay for. He added with a patronizing smile, "Just stay patient. Maybe 12 to 18 months and we can revisit." The words hit me like a slap. 12 to 18 months, after 14 years of delivering results executives bragged about, after building the very systems Brent used in board presentations as examples of regional excellence, after being told repeatedly that I was next. He tried to soften it with, "It's not about you, Selah. It's timing. The company's tightening budgets across the board." But even that was a lie. I had seen the expense allocations. The company was investing heavily in expansion, new software, new marketing campaigns, everything except the people who kept shipments moving, and clients satisfied. "And compensation?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No changes at this time," he said. "The raise is tied to the role. Since the role isn't being created, everything stays as is, but your commitment won't be forgotten." It already had been. I stood there, realizing the truth in one sharp, painful breath. This promotion had never been coming. It was a leash, not a reward. A story told just convincingly enough to keep me producing results that made Brent look indispensable. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me stunned. I just nodded, thanked him for the update, and walked out. But inside, something irreversible cracked open. Not rage, not grief, clarity, the kind that strips away sentiment and reveals the exact value someone places on you. And Brent had just shown me mine. When I left Brent's office that afternoon, I didn't storm out or slam doors the way people imagine when they picture someone pushed past their limit. I walked with a quietness that felt almost foreign to me, like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I reached my desk, closed the door, and sat in the chair I had occupied through years of weekends, crisis calls, and emergency reroutes. But instead of opening my dashboard or answering the backlog of client emails, I just stared at the screen, feeling the weight of 14 years settling into place. Not like an accomplishment, but like a warning I had refused to read. I had believed I was building toward something. I had believed patience meant progress. But patience without respect is just exploitation with better packaging. The realization didn't make me shake or cry. It steadied me. I opened my laptop not to work, but to make the smallest adjustment with the biggest implication. I changed my LinkedIn status to open to opportunities. It was a simple toggle, barely a second long, yet it felt like cutting the first thread of a rope I had been tangled in for years. The notifications began immediately, the kind I had ignored for months, even years, because I trusted Brent, trusted the company, trusted the path I thought I was on. Messages from recruiters, industry directors, supply chain firms looking for someone to stabilize their operations. A few of them I recognized as former colleagues now thriving in places that had actually recognized their talent. I clicked through them mechanically at first, not letting myself feel what their interest implied about the way I'd been undervalued. Then I saw one email that stopped me. Jordan Vega, CEO of Redline Transit Group, sent 1 week earlier. Subject line, VP of Regional Operations, wanna talk? I remembered seeing his name before. Redline had been quietly rising in the Southwest. Faster systems, sharper leadership, a reputation for valuing people with operational instincts rather than degrees alone. I had ignored his outreach because Brent had convinced me the VP seat at HarborSpan was only weeks away. The irony was almost bitter enough to taste. I opened the message. Jordan had written about expanding Redline's footprint, about needing someone who understood the intricacies of multi-state freight orchestration, someone with a track record of crisis-proofing operations. He didn't flatter. He didn't beg. He simply stated what Redline needed and why he believed I was the person for the job. I reread Brent's earlier words in my mind. Just be patient. Maybe 18 months. The timing isn't right. And contrasted them with Jordan's direct, confident tone. One man needed me to stay small. The other recognized the space I was meant to fill. My reply was short. Jordan, I'm available to meet this weekend if you are. Selah. I hit send at 6:02 p.m. The response came less than 20 minutes later. Selah, I've hoped for this. Can we meet tomorrow morning at 9:30? I'll adjust anything on my schedule to make it work. That was the moment the shift inside me became permanent. Not because Jordan offered validation, but because his willingness to prioritize the conversation showed me something Brent never had: respect for my time, my value, and the weight of what I brought to a company's foundation. I closed my laptop and leaned back, hearing the hum of the building around me. A building I had practically held together for years without the title, without the compensation, without the acknowledgement. And for the first time, I didn't feel tethered to it anymore. The breaking point wasn't an explosion. It was a release. When someone shows you their intentions clearly, the only question left is what you're willing to tolerate. And I had finally reached the end of mine. I barely slept that night, not because I was anxious, but because something inside me felt awake for the first time in years. It was strange, feeling possibility instead of pressure, anticipation instead of exhaustion. When the sun came up, I got dressed with the same meticulousness I used on days I presented to the board, except this time, I wasn't preparing to prove myself to people who had taken me for granted. I was preparing to walk into a room where my value had already been recognized before I even spoke a word. Redline's headquarters sat on the edge of Phoenix's logistics corridor, a modern glass and steel building that looked nothing like HarborSpan's aging beige complex. Even the parking lot felt different, newer, cleaner, filled with vehicles belonging to people who weren't afraid to invest in themselves. I walked inside at 9:28 a.m. A receptionist greeted me with warmth instead of corporate stiffness, and before I could sit, Jordan appeared from the hallway, smiling like he'd been waiting at the door. Selah, thank you for meeting on a Saturday, he said, shaking my hand with the kind of grip that conveyed sincerity, not dominance. For you, anytime. The difference between Brent and Jordan hit me immediately. Brent treated time like something I owed him. Jordan treated it like something he appreciated. He led me into a conference room overlooking the distribution yard, where trucks were already on the move. He didn't start with small talk. He didn't waste a second. "I've followed your work for years," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. On the screen was a full breakdown of HarborSpan's Southwest operations, my systems, my protocols, my crisis response structure. He had done his homework. "Your fingerprints are on every efficiency they brag about," he continued, "and frankly, I'm surprised they waited this long to give you the title you deserve." I didn't tell him they had never intended to give it to me. I didn't need to. He read it in my silence. Selah, Redline is expanding aggressively in the next 18 months. We're entering the Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California manufacturing corridors. That region needs a leader who understands both strategy and ground-level operations. We need someone who can see the whole chessboard. He paused. "You're that person." Brent had used excuses. Jordan used recognition. Brent had talked about budgets. Jordan talked about vision. Brent needed me to stay exactly where I was. Jordan wanted me to lead something bigger. Then he slid a single-page offer letter toward me. Simple, direct, not wrapped in the bureaucratic nonsense HarborSpan loved to hide behind. VP of Regional Operations, $252,000 annual base, equity incentives starting at year 1, full operational authority across 4 states, build your own team freedom, no waiting, no promises, immediate. The number didn't shock me as much as the clarity. HarborSpan had always made my compensation feel like something I should be grateful for. At Redline, it was presented as the natural exchange for expertise. "If you accept," Jordan said, "I want you to start Monday, and I want you to bring the mindset HarborSpan took for granted." For a moment, I pictured Brent sitting in his corner office, believing he'd ended the conversation about my future by postponing my promotion. He had no idea I was sitting across from a man who saw me as a cornerstone rather than a convenience. "I accept," I said. No hesitation, no fear. A clean, decisive answer, the kind I had never been allowed to give at HarborSpan without justification, explanation, or apology. Jordan stood and extended his hand again, but this time the moment felt different. This wasn't a meeting, this was a beginning. As he walked me out, he said, "Build what you want to build, and when you're ready, we'll talk about who you want on your team." He didn't press, he didn't pry, he didn't assume. He simply opened the door and let me choose. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. A chapter had closed without grief. Another had opened without hesitation. And somewhere back at Harbor Span, Brent still believed he had contained the damage. He truly had no idea what was coming. The hours after I accepted Redline's offer felt strangely calm, like standing on a shoreline right before a tide begins to shift. I didn't announce anything publicly. I didn't hint or whisper. I simply went home, made myself dinner, and let the decision settle into my bones. It felt right in a way nothing at Harbor Span had felt in years, but the quiet didn't last. The first message came Saturday afternoon from Maya. "Heard something weird. Brent canceled your promotion? Tell me it's not true." I stared at her text for a long moment, debating whether to shield her from the truth. But I had mentored Maya for 5 years, watched her grow into one of the sharpest coordinators in the region. She deserved honesty. "It's true," I wrote. "Indefinitely postponed, budget excuse." Her reply came instantly. "Scylla, that's garbage. None of this place works without you. If you leave, I swear, just say the word." I didn't say the word. I didn't need to. The frustration that had been simmering under the surface for months was already bubbling across the team. A few hours later, Riley messaged me, then Cass, then one of the night shift analysts who rarely contacted me outside emergencies. Every one of them had heard whispers. Every one of them was angry in a way I hadn't anticipated. Somehow, the moment Brent tried to bury my promotion, the entire floor felt the tremor. What surprised me wasn't their loyalty. It was their clarity. They knew exactly what the decision meant. They understood what I had tried for years to ignore. Harbor Span didn't see me as a leader, only as a safety net. And no one wants to build a career under someone who keeps cutting the very foundation they stand on. I didn't recruit anyone. I didn't even hint at Redline. But the truth has a way of traveling through hallways faster than gossip. By late Saturday evening, 3 people had asked me the same question in different words. "If you go, can we come with you?" I told each of them what I believed. You should build your career where you're valued, not where you're tolerated. Those words weren't permission. They were freedom. Sunday morning, Jordan called to finalize paperwork. After we finished the logistics, he asked lightly, "Anyone you think highly of who might want a better place to grow?" I hesitated, not wanting to seem vindictive, but honesty won out. "There are a few exceptional people," I said carefully. "People Harbor Span doesn't know how to keep." "Then let's give them options," he replied. "No pressure, no agenda, just opportunity." Redline's HR sent outreach emails that afternoon. Standard inquiries, nothing flashy, nothing targeted. Just the kind of open door Harbor Span had slammed shut one too many times. And I didn't know it then, but those simple emails would ignite the first spark of a wildfire. Monday morning arrived, my first official day at Redline. I walked into my new office at 8:12 a.m., still adjusting to the reality of my name on a VP door. I hadn't even finished logging into my inbox before my phone buzzed with a message from a former colleague. Maya just resigned. 10 minutes later, Riley too. Another 20. Cass turned in her notice. Brent is losing his mind. I stared at my screen, stunned not by their decisions but by the speed. I knew they were unhappy. I didn't know they were ready. It was like watching a dam burst, suddenly, violently, and with the force of years of pressure, finally having somewhere to go. At 10:03 a.m., Brent called me from his personal number. I didn't answer. I had no obligation to soothe him or explain what he had caused. By noon, I had 3 signed acceptance letters from Redline sitting on my desk. Maya, Riley, Cass. Not because I recruited them, not because I promised them anything, but because they understood something Brent never grasped. People don't follow titles. They follow leadership, and leadership is earned long before it's recognized. Brent still believed the situation could be contained. He still believed he was only losing 3 employees. He had no idea the real collapse had only just begun. By the time Brent finally reached me on Monday afternoon, he wasn't calling as a confident regional VP anymore. His voice had lost that clipped authority he used whenever he wanted to make people feel small. Now it carried something raw, panic, confusion, a tremor of disbelief that the foundation he depended on was suddenly slipping out from under him. "Selah, what is happening? 3 of your senior people quit this morning, back to back to back." I kept my tone even. "Brent, I'm not with HarborSpan anymore. I resigned Friday evening. Whatever is happening now is something you'll need to manage." For several seconds he said nothing. I imagined him sitting at his desk, staring at the resignation letters, realizing too late that none of those employees had been loyal to the company. They had been loyal to the stability I created. "You resigned?" he finally choked out. "I didn't receive anything." "I sent it at 6:47 p.m., I replied, "effective immediately." He exhaled sharply. "You left without notice? You abandoned your team?" I almost laughed at the sudden moral outrage. "No, I left a company that abandoned me first." His breathing grew uneven. "Are they going to redline? Tell me the truth." I looked at the 3 signed acceptance packets on my desk. "People make their own decisions," I said. "If they want to build their career somewhere they're supported, that's their choice." He called again an hour later, and again the next morning, and again the morning after that, but the tone changed each time. Shock became worry. Worry became desperation. Desperation became fear because the real fallout had begun. By Wednesday, only 2 days after Maya Riley and Cass walked out, the first major disruption hit HarborSpan. A high-volume aerospace manufacturer submitted an emergency complaint. A shipment had been delayed 19 hours because the replacement coordinator didn't know the exception routing protocol I'd created years earlier. The delay forced the client to shut down an entire production line for half a day. Penalty fees kicked in, customer trust cracked, complaints multiplied, and once one client complains, others start inspecting their own recent shipments. By Friday, HarborSpan's on-time delivery had dropped from 97.9% to 84.2%. In logistics, that number isn't a dip, it's a hemorrhage. People were calling out sick. Others were updating their resumes. Analysts were whispering about interviewing elsewhere. Brent brought in a 400 per hour consultant to help stabilize the chaos, but the consultant couldn't replicate institutional memory or rebuild a system 15 years in the making in a weekend. I received updates from former co-workers throughout the week, not gossip, warnings. "Selah, everything is unraveling." Brent tried handling the morning coordination himself. It was a disaster. 3 more people resigned today. Clients are threatening to review their contracts. People are asking why leadership didn't promote you when they had the chance. On the morning of day 12, Brent called again. This time he didn't sound angry or defensive. He sounded broken. "Selah, we can't keep up. We've lost 7 people, maybe more. Clients are furious. The board is asking questions. I need your help." I let silence sit between us long enough for the reality to sink in. "Brent," I finally said, "everything you're feeling right now is the result of one decision you made. You had 14 years of proof that I kept your region running. You had 18 months of promises you didn't intend to honor. You didn't postpone a role. You dismantled the stability you took credit for." He inhaled shakily. "We can fix this. Just tell me what you want. A salary increase, the VP title, equity, whatever it takes." It would have been flattering if it weren't so predictable. People in power always recognize value the moment losing it becomes painful, but by then it's not respect, it's survival. "I already have all of that," I said quietly, "at a company that didn't need a crisis to see my worth." He didn't respond. I could hear his breath catch, like he was realizing he hadn't just lost employees or performance metrics. He had lost the foundation of an entire regional operation, and the collapse wasn't stopping. In the next week, HarborSpan bled more talent. Contracts began shifting quietly toward redline. Clients cited concerns about reliability, communication gaps, and leadership instability. 14 days after Brent canceled my Promotion: the Southwest Division had lost 9 staff members and more than $40 million in projected quarterly volume. 21 days in, the number reached $142 million. Brent didn't call again after that. He didn't need to. The story was already writing itself across the logistics industry. When you break the trust of the person holding everything together, you don't just lose them. You lose everything they kept standing. In the weeks that followed HarborSpan's collapse, I didn't gloat, didn't watch from the sidelines with vindictive satisfaction the way people imagine someone in my position might. I was too busy building. Redline's expansion moved faster than any of us expected. Jordan trusted me with decisions executives at my old company would have debated for years. I restructured the Southwest Corridor, streamlined cross-state routing, and rebuilt the operational blueprint HarborSpan had taken for granted. Except this time, I wasn't patching holes. I was designing a system that belonged to a company investing in its own future. Maya, Riley, and Cass thrived in ways HarborSpan never allowed. Their ideas weren't dismissed as not aligned with current leadership goals. They were implemented, refined, improved, and every time our metrics climbed, every time a client praised our precision, I saw confirmation of something I had known deep down, but had never dared to say out loud. Talent doesn't flourish under people who fear it. It flourishes where it's recognized. 3 months into my new role, we secured a contract with a major electronics manufacturer. One HarborSpan had serviced for 20 years. The client didn't hesitate when they shifted to Redline. They simply said, "We trust the person who kept us running all those years." That trust wasn't something Brent could claw back. It wasn't something HarborSpan could buy. It was earned in late-night crisis calls, holiday weekends spent rerouting freight, and years of being the quiet architect behind results other people presented as their own. 16 months after the day Brent postponed my promotion, a colleague sent me a link to an industry journal. The headline nearly stopped my breath. Case study: leadership failure and the $142 million consequence of ignoring operational talent. It detailed every decision leading to HarborSpan's implosion, carefully, analytically, unmistakably. But what struck me wasn't the financial fallout. It was the conclusion. Organizations that fail to recognize the people who build their operational infrastructure will eventually lose the infrastructure itself. They didn't mention me by name, but they didn't have to. Everyone in the industry knew who had held HarborSpan together. Everyone knew who Brent had underestimated, and everyone knew where I was now. A few months later, during a logistics leadership conference, a young operations manager approached me after my keynote. She looked nervous, hopeful, and exhausted in a way I recognized instantly. "How do you know when it's time to leave a place that keeps postponing your future?" she asked. I thought of Brent's office, of the condescending reassurances, of the years I spent believing patience would eventually convert into recognition. "You'll know," I told her gently, "the moment you realize you're waiting for people who benefit from keeping you where you are." She nodded slowly, as if the answer confirmed something she already feared. Before she walked away, she said, "I hope I end up somewhere that sees what I bring." I smiled. "Then go where you're seen. Don't wait for a company to notice you only after you're gone." That was the truth HarborSpan had learned too late, and the truth Brent had never expected to face. The irony is that my promotion wasn't canceled. It simply happened somewhere else, somewhere that didn't need to lose everything before understanding my worth. Losing that promotion didn't just bruise my ego, it cracked something deeper in me. For years, I had convinced myself that loyalty would eventually balance the scales, that showing up early and staying late would someday translate into the respect I'd earned. But waiting cost me more than I realized. It cost birthdays I worked through, weekends spent fixing problems I didn't cause, and the quiet belief that leadership would honor the effort I kept pouring into that place. When Brent brushed off 14 years of sacrifice with a smile and a script about budget timing, it didn't just expose him. It exposed every small moment I had excused, every red flag I had rationalized, every warning I had pushed aside because I was too tired to start over somewhere else. The truth hit me hard. The personal cost wasn't just the work. It was the faith I had placed in people who benefited from my silence. Still, stepping away showed me something I needed to learn. My value wasn't in how much pain I could tolerate. It was in how quickly everything fell apart once I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. If I could sit across from anyone who feels the way I once did, I would tell you this. Don't confuse endurance for loyalty. Don't mistake familiarity for safety. And don't wait for someone else to validate the work you already know you're doing. Your life is bigger than one company, one title, or one person's inability to see you clearly. How to get started today. Write down every promise you've been given at work. Then look at how many were kept. Pay attention to who benefits when you stay silent. Ask yourself what your work is costing outside the office. Stop excusing behavior you'd never tolerate from anyone else. Give yourself permission to look at other opportunities without guilt. What part of this story reminded you of something you've lived through?